Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Mainspring's office hours. We're going to mix the format up a bit for this session with our good friend Matt joining us, and we're gonna try a sort of a different format for the meeting. And yeah, and so anyways, the topic for today is best practices in programming in development in general. So Matt, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So this is a straight up discussion, not presentation. So I don't have specific stuff I wanted to show. What I really wanted to do is for the hour is to talk about different areas of FileMaker. I kind of observed in the stuff that I'm doing, and especially kind of clashing a little bit with some other developers on some things lately, trying to talk about what actually is a best practice for a thing. Does everybody actually agree that the spider graphs are stupid and anchor buoy is the only way to go? Yeah, maybe showing my little bias. Just where does complexity go? Are custom functions still a main place you should put things? There's just kind of a lot of areas like that I don't know if there's really consensus of what we could sort of agree would be maybe not the best practice, but a best practice for a given thing. That's kind of what I wanted to get to. So anybody who wants to talk, come on video, throw a topic out there that you want to discuss. I kind of want to hit on several different areas of FileMaker. So, themes, yeah, kind of design in general. Yeah, kind of that. I might even kick one off. Usage of themes, just a quick poll. Would everybody agree that as much as possible, every object on every layout be within a theme? Or do you think they're just not all that?
So do you want to talk about best practices, or do you want to talk about realistic expectations? Because there's also the difference between that. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, sure, every object on every layout should have a safe style for consistency. Right. But in the real world, and this is a non-FileMaker observation as well. So like if I'm doing web development, there's always going to be objects that don't have that go out of that. And
oh, totally.
This is kind of a side effect of FileMaker. It's great that you can have themes, but the problem with FileMaker's themes, or one of the problems with FileMaker's themes, is that you can only ever assign one object to, or one style to one object. Like you select that object, you select what style from your list. Yeah. And in the real world, that's just not practical, because if you look at something like Tailwind for doing web programming, it's semantics classes where you might have a base class like button that gives it certain properties, but then you can also say, I also want this to be italic or bold or text 2XL or something like that. So because in FileMaker you can't mix those things together, since you can't do style classes, you would have to, like, your theme is going to become unwieldy if you have every single combination of every possible buttons. So what I like as a best practice for themes is the base style for that. So like button, action button, like danger button. Bootstrap's actually really good at naming conventions for that kind of stuff. They have like button info, button primary, button secondary. Yeah. So keeping those at the base style, but I wouldn't say it's a best practice of saying that everything, every object you create should probably have a style that you start from, but it doesn't need to remain in that style. So like changes to it after you've assigned that base style are okay and expected.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think, I guess I would kind of posit that I think you and I are on the exact same page. But are there people who think, yeah, styles, no, not worth it? They don't really have that much of a performance impact for FileMaker Client. They have a huge performance impact for FileMaker Go and for WebDirect. But if you're not delivering to those platforms, I guess is there any dissension on this one or discussion?
And you don't have to put comments in the chat, Jeff, like you
Yeah,
can.
Well, I
Get
just
on
don't
the
want to
microphone
interrupt
and say
people.
something.
we need people.
But
This
yes,
isn't-
I absolutely agree. Just
Yeah.
I
Every-
will often set up a theme, and then in addition to the theme, I will, for example, a particular style is left aligned by default, but then in one particular place, I need to right align the text. So I keep it at that style, but I right align that one object. And then if I update the style, it updates everything but the right align on that one object.
Yep. I have a favorite gotcha with themes. You can save them. If you don't save the whole theme, every layout can have its own set of things saved to that layout. And so you can make a change to the theme on the layout and everything else on that layout will change, but not until you save the theme will it affect all the layouts. And so you could actually have many different layouts in your same database. Every one of them has local themes. And when you save it on one layout, it's going to overwrite and modify things on all the other layouts, which is, I don't think that's the way they intended for that to work, but something to be wary of.
I think that's kind of how they intended it to work, because it's a two-step process.
Yeah.
You're saving the style to like your local scope, and then you're
Yeah.
saving it to the global scope as a two-step process. So
Yeah.
that implies that there's intent that you want to broadcast those changes globally if you take that second step.
I can't imagine ever not wanting to. The only time I ever have local scoped theme is if I forget to save it.
Huh?
Yeah.
Then I think that's maybe a training issue.
Yeah, training myself. Hey, Eric. Hey, everyone.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I wish more people can turn on video for a second. Let's just have a social say hello, Count what country you're in.
People were getting on error message trying to get in, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's here, I'll put it in the chat.
That's Brian's fault. This is his meeting. You don't have permission to join because your unique link has been used too many times. Oh boy.
Oh man, have we hit the limit of 25 people? And then I wonder if it's our Office subscription doesn't have enough.
Well, I kept retrying, and then finally it let me in.
We are 25 people.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
somebody must have lost their connection, and I just slipped in.
Yeah. Dang. All right. Well, I'll leave so people can get in.
Let me work on that while
Okay.
finding an
Okay,
answer to
maybe
that
we'll
while you
change it.
continue the discussion.
I hate to say it, but I could also start a Zoom because I have an unlimited Zoom, but that's too late to kind of do that and go. So, okay, naming conventions. I guess my question is there even the possibility of having a naming convention be a best practice for things like themes? Or is it just like, no, it's not worth having that, just go your own way? Who has an opinion on that? First, specifically to themes, and then like in general, fields, togs.
It's a tough crowd today, Matt.
I actually have an opinion as somebody new to the game. I feel like learning best practice for myself is better, and then putting my own spin on it or tweaking it, or as you know what you're doing moving forward. But it feels like having best practice would be the way to go, because then new people learning it coming in, they know what they're looking at and they know how to apply it and kind of how to get going in it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're saying there should be the possibility of a best practice, even though we might not really agree on it. Like, I really like themes being the point size being the first thing. And then I like to have it so that I can, when I look at the style, I want to know the point size, if it's right or left or lined, and if there's a color option or something like that. Rather than, you know, standard portal or, you know, but then I also have a set for editing and a set for viewing. And so there's a queue that you're looking at a field and a layout that's editable or not. I think that's important. What about naming conventions for table occurrence groups? I think TOGs, we may have more agreement on a best practice there. Who uses? Tell me, give me some ideas of what you guys use for naming conventions on a TOG.
I think more generic is better. I mean, you go to the like 12-point left justified. I don't care about the name, type, or body, whatever, because I may use that style in a whole bunch of places that aren't body or aren't title.
Yep.
Names actually match the characteristics I apply to the style, so I can just read that and say, yeah, I want a 48-point left justified blue font. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you and I agree on that one. So what about table occurrence groups? Like, for example, and I like to try to have an underscore only ever mean that that's a relationship. So company underscore, you know, invoice, company underscore invoice underscore line item. So I know exactly where I am on the, when I'm working on the layout. But some people do it the other way around. Some people do uppercase. What naming conventions? Yeah.
I use tildes to break between TO occurrences to show relationships. Yeah, underscores show up in file names too often to take and make a distinction. So the tilde is the character I use.
Okay. That makes sense. I like that.
I've seen so many different ones. Honestly, the thing that to me just strikes me as like the best practice is internal consistency. If you've got multiple different naming conventions across one file, that's when I'm going to be getting really confused.
I think you hit the nail on the head with something. I would say, and I don't think I'd get any disagreement with this one, that the overall best practice for everything is that you're consistent within your solution, whatever you're doing. So I think that's a best practice all by itself.
And a lot of the systems we make over here, so they're all related to PeopleSoft and Oracle original tables, which all tend to be all caps and already have underscores in them, which I don't usually like typing. But yeah, so we tend to use anything that's not, you know, PeopleSoft or Oracle. We tend to use camel case or lowercase prefixes and things like that, just to distinguish that it's something that we added or we're doing, and it's not something that's coming straight out of the original data.
Other ideas? I think you're totally right about if you have external things, that's a big factor. You have to adapt to what's already there.
Whenever I bring another coder into a project I'm working on, I give them my coding standards guide that I wrote and says, here's how my stuff looks. Yeah, you might want to try to comply with it if we're going to work together.
Yeah, I should have done that.
Yeah, if you put a naming convention in a certain project, where does everybody usually save it? In the script, in a blank script file, or
I've got stuff like that saved as script files, and then you can put the MBS now supports the script colon and then the reference to the script that you can place in any other script, and it just opens that script. So I put a reference what you want, you bang, it opens it up, and I can read it, and it only takes one line out of your code.
That sounds
You could
cool.
also
Can you
simply
show
create
that?
a blank. You can create a blank layout and write all your instructions as text fields, have a complete, just a basic blank instructions layout, put it at the very top of the list right away, and write it all out, show examples right there. So let them read it at their own pace and such.
By the way, I would be super happy for people sharing their screen. And Kirk, I would love to see what you were just talking about, because that sounds really cool. I don't know about that feature in MBS, and I definitely always want to keep expanding what I'm doing there.
Oh, there's like 40 new features, and not all new, I guess, in the Monkey Bread stuff. There's free stuff, including things like code snippets. You can put in context menus and just, save the code snippets, and they show up in your context menu script workspace. Bang, they're done. It's got some cool stuff in it.
Yeah, that's for sure. I kind of just use the basics. I think I need to really up my game. Let's see, what other areas?
Who else does things with code snippets? I mean, there's so much repetitive code we end up doing. How do people manage? I mean, I've done the Monkey Bread stuff for a while, but now I'm starting to move to Raycast and using Dan Shockley's tools combined with Raycast and Clara snippets to do the same thing.
Yeah, I use Raycast for that.
And the nice part about that is you can put your snippets library in an online Git repository and point to it with Raycast, and that way you can work on a team. Everybody work on the same snippets.
You're kind of next
Not
level.
familiar with Raycast.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Not familiar with Raycast, but I use Text Expander, which sounds like a very similar concept. You can put up your libraries, etc.
Yeah, so Text Expander is that's its function. Raycast is kind of an overall thing for the OS on the Mac. You can pop up a little search thing, and you could type a name of an app or anything like that, and it saves multiple clipboards. It has a ton of features, like in different areas, but it's like a general Mac utility.
And you can go to the Raycast store, and Clara Snippets is there, which provides the connection back to Shockley's AppleScript tools, that they can integrate that smoothly into the operation. So.
Yep.
Two big issues with those things. The dropship's another one that has been out there for a while and has come and gone in conversation. But one is the Raycast stuff that's Mac OS only. Still do have people that are only Windows, developing on Windows and stuff. The second thing is the semantics of it, and this is generally the problem with all those text expanders, is the people that take the times to build their own snippet library, their list of snippets. It's very much under a naming convention that they understand. So when you actually load somebody else's snippet library, you either have to read through all those snippets and create your own memory of what that thing is, like, create JWT token or something like that and get a code snippet of that. So there's a chance that its usefulness is diluted or lost from that, or it gets cluttered up because suddenly if you're connecting to multiple people's snippet libraries, and I suddenly type out, loop inside loop or something like that, I might have 18 different, snippets. So like, which one is the right one? So what that ends up doing is creating scripts that are, mixed context between multiple different developers' style of commenting, style of scripting.
Yeah.
So in the end, and this is my opinion of what I hammered down on our dev team here at Mainspring, is above all else, everything needs to be human readable. So that trickles down to naming conventions, layout object styles, the way that you script. Like I should be able to look at a script and read it like I'm reading a book and understand what it's doing top to bottom. And if I open up a script and it's like 2,000 lines of scripting long, I'm going to be like, how can we do this better? But commenting, like I see a lot of scripts that are over commented. Like somebody makes a navigation script like print report or something, and it goes to a layout, it does a find, saves as PDF, takes the user back, whatever. It's 10 lines of code. And then I open up the script and there's 30 lines of comments at the beginning saying like what context this is run at, what layouts is, and usually those comments also become out of date as well. So like maybe somebody generates that script and when they first implement it, they say it's attached to this button on this layout. And then they do some other development in the system and they attach it to 3 other buttons somewhere else in the system. And suddenly, suddenly that script is no longer up to date with what context that's always running in. So
I would
with
prefer over commenting than under commenting.
But like if you have more comments than you do script steps, you're probably over commenting. The other thing is like if I really want to know everywhere in that system where that script is called, I'm not going to count on the script telling you that. I'm going to count on a tool like FM Perception, which is cross-platform, being able to tell me that and tell me that fairly quickly when the need arises. So yeah, that's kind of the mindset that I try to instill upon people is human readability and like developer readability. So try to code in that style.
I write everything in binary. I mean, assembler, it's just easy.
One of the advantages of Raycast and the Clever Snippet stuff is you get the graded description for your snippet. So it isn't just like a name. You actually can look at the description before you apply it. So you could have, you don't end up with, if you end up with 3 or 4 different loops there, you can actually see comments to determine which one's the one you want to use.
And that's also a good, that's a good aside about this whole conversation about best practices is things get, exponentially more complicated once you're talking about a team of developers that works together versus, there's a lot of people on this call now that are, solo devs or work in a very small team. So the more and more people you start adding to your team, the more and more you have to think about like, if I take my vacation next week and somebody else has to come in and finish that work, are they able to do that? And it's a combination of what tools do you use, what naming conventions, what scripting styles, everything that makes you a unique developer needs to somehow be shared now. And that's been that's been very difficult.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you have more senior devs, that probably is even more because like we're so set in our ways. The more experience we have. I've changed like a lot over my approach to FileMaker a lot over the years as the platform has changed. But I mean, deciding which set of 350 functions you're going to bring with you to every single solution you work on is really quite a. I'm totally kidding. I don't do that. But that brings me to your question.
One of the things I find
Pardon?
One of the things I find in team development is, I do a lot of stuff now with comment lines that are, for instance, all exclamation points or all question marks or all things, because a coder, if he's putting something in or if he has a question about existing code, can mark it and we can find it in FM Perception in the code scripts and say, here's something somebody had a question on we need to fix, or here's new code that's been added, or here's stuff that needs to be tested because it has a comment that's all T's. So it blocks out the code with comment structures that are nothing more than a single character across the whole line. But it makes it easy to find for teams to take and do code reviews and jump into stuff.
Vince Bonanno showed me a demo of the upcoming version of Inspector Pro, and it's insane. It's so next level for stuff exactly like that for a team. I'm not going to do a commercial for it, but it basically has a server that grabs the information, the XML from the file constantly, like every 15 minutes, and processing it and tracking the changes, and then making that all available for everybody to search immediately. It's really well thought out tool.
That's the big historical problem with the Inspector Pro and base elements is it takes so long to load the database with the DVR that you get out of it. I might run 4 or 5 F reception runs a day if I'm heavy in a coding. So I can't do that with those other tools. Maybe this will
Yeah.
fix that.
Yeah, it will from what he showed me. So yeah, more engaged. Who's going to engage? 2, 3. That's it. 3 people.
Yeah.
Everybody else has video cameras.
You and 599 of your closest friends.
Did they sell out?
They were down to the last 50 last time I checked.
Okay.
So there's 550 signed up. Oh, and if you haven't, follow. There was an email within the last week that was talking about registering for events. It sends you a one-time password when you follow the link, and then you go and log in and you mark what events that you're attending. Apparently some of the conference rooms are quite small, so they will sell out.
Yep.
So you want to go and kind of put your session schedule together. I'm one of the people that hates to do that because like I am very spur of the moment in terms of what I want to walk into, and like kind of in like the first 5 minutes, if I'm not really engaged, I'll go and walk somewhere else. So I think you'll still be allowed to do that as long as there's free seats, but also the meeting space is quite spread out from what I understand. It's not like there's going to be 8 rooms all in a row next to each other where you can pop room to room. They might be on, 3 different floors, one side of the building versus another side of the building. So it's certainly going to be a very interesting social experiment for Engage this year.
Yeah, Barb Cooney commented yesterday that her presentation sold out, so there's no more seats.
But I mean, her room might only have 50 seats in it. So if 50 people have checked off that button, then and I doubt they're going to be like scanning people's tag to make sure that they're registered to let them in the room. I just don't think they have the manpower for that. So we'll see. See you in 3 weeks.
Getting a couple emails from people about the not being able to join. Let me copy this link and see if it works.
Yeah, so when you register through like the meeting registration page, you get a link for you that is unique to you, and when it senses that more than like 2 or 3 connections are in, so somebody must have shared their.
Yeah, I actually posted the link that I was given to the meetup group.
I think that's your presenter link, so that might also have caused some issues.
Oh, I didn't know that. So I just had the link I'd seen. Yeah, good old Teams.
Yeah.
That's why I like Zoom rooms. Well, Teams is better at some things because like the first person who comes can start it. And with Zoom, usually you have to have the presenter do that. But let's see, like what other areas I'm curious, like, yeah, this is good discussion for sure. Custom functions. I brought that up. I worked with a project a bunch of years ago, and I'm not kidding. The person brought in a library of several hundred custom functions, and most of them called other custom functions in the set, which called other custom functions in the set. So it was really, really difficult to maintain. That was kind of an end, that was an edge case, I think. Personally, I don't. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's not really an edge case. I mean, there are developers where they need that structure to work because that's how they've learned, and there's certain reasons why that would be valid, but it is also hard to maintain. But again, it goes back to readability. If all the function names are some sort of like weird code, where somebody's not going to understand what that function does just by reading the function name or the parameters in it when it auto completes, then it gets a little dicey.
Yep. But you can have custom functions that are really named clearly and make things really easy too. So, but do you actually? So in your organization, do you have a set that you put in for most applications?
We don't have a standard set aside from for our Better Forms projects, just the Better Forms library that we copy and paste. But that's really the only example we have of where we're putting those in. And sometimes we'll paste those in and they're already in a file, so you'll get like the number 2 after everything.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, then it gets hard to.
Anybody else in the room? Like, who uses a set of custom functions on most projects?
I try to avoid them. It just obfuscates code. I mean, it's almost as bad as putting code in the security model and trying to find out why something didn't work 6 months from now. And just figuring out that you buried something in the security model someplace that you just didn't see any place. It's not visible. Or like Matt Petrovsky is putting a let statement to set a global variable off screen right that's triggered by a hide condition. How obscure can you be?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if it's repeatable code, then it's like, I mean, how is he going to do that without? And then and it's something that you may want to modify, and you want to modify everywhere at once. Then you're gonna have to change that manually in all those different places.
Yeah, as long as you're judicious about the use of it and do some common function stuff. But people that start applying custom functions to everything becomes a nightmare to manage code development.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of
What do you think about the use case of putting like a custom function creates your API credentials, because you can let people, I forget, can you separate out people to allow them to edit scripts but not edit custom functions?
Yep.
Yeah. So
yes,
that's a use case for securing your credentials. You put your API credential in a custom function, and then if somebody opens up that script to edit the script, they can see that function, but maybe they don't have data viewer access to be able to like view the result of that. So it's only ever going to be processed at runtime or something like that.
Yeah, but if you have any credentials anywhere in schema, anywhere, as opposed to in a field, then if you do an analysis of the file, the XML version, they're in there.
Yeah,
So
but if you're locking them out from the data viewer, that locks out pretty much all the tools. And you said they wouldn't be able to run a DDR at that point. That would be
Okay. That's kind of the only reason I remember that.
Yeah, that's another thing about like another warning about your comments about Inspector Pro is like if you have all that stuff in your schema, you said it's going to a server somewhere so it can be hosted. Is that your own server?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it Beeswax's server? And then like if you do have secure information, because I mean, even if it's in your scripts, it's still going to be, if you hard code an API key in your script as a variable, that's going to be in your schema too.
Yep. If you put it in a value in a field in a table, a script, you can lock it out so that users can't see it, data viewer or otherwise. And the script can be called with full access so that another script can read it and use it in real time to use, which I guess data viewer will be able to see that. But then you can actually really secure it. So having it as data is, I think, a more secure place. But this is kind of I don't know, I guess that could be a case for a custom function, or for a case for a best practice, but it's kind of.
That's a whole separate session, how to secure your credentials.
Yeah.
So what do you think about on the other end of the scale with I forget, like when people do like sometimes special characters like tab and things like that, are they using custom functions for that?
I have in the past. A custom function called tab.
Oh yeah, and it just puts char, whatever in there.
Yeah.
I forget. I've seen things like that where some of the special characters that they don't want to have to remember the number for.
Oh, for sure.
they'll put it, I think in their custom function or maybe to a global variable, and then just pepper those around wherever they use them.
There's a lot of those. I mean, like is PC or is Mac, like those are ones rather than just learning like what Get System platform is.
Yeah.
But
I did something like that with what was it? Oh, the modifier keys. I was tired of trying to remember which modifier keys were being pressed. And so I just
Yeah.
put in one where like almost anything would work, where you could actually spell it out, or you could put the number of it, or you could you could do an abbreviation of it. And they would all work. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
have to remember how to do that each time.
I'm trying to remember that. Are they like 1, 2, 4, 8? So if you see one that's like 9, you know exactly which 2 they are, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1, 2, 4, 8,
Um,
16.
Yeah.
And
I got tired of trying to figure that out. So I just made it so that you alt or control or opt or any of those things that I could possibly put in there would just work.
Yeah. I don't really
I
have.
use a modifier variables custom function and just declare it at the beginning of a script where I need it. It automatically sets is option or is command or whatever.
We've
dollar
got
signs.
We've got way bigger nerds in this meeting than I thought we were going to have, getting into some really deep stuff here. I'm really kind of digging that. But I also I invited the people in the class that I was just finished teaching before this, who are probably like, "What the hell are you guys talking about?"
Oh, like
So,
shift key, control key, things like that, right?
Yeah, I know. But I mean, I kind of don't think that it's necessarily a good. It doesn't really necessarily make a good user interface for basic users to even allow them to do stuff like that.
Oh, that's why we
we
tend to use it more advanced cases where like we have
Yeah.
a power user who's okay.
Yeah, you
they
gotta-
don't want to just do one at a time, but if they hold down the shift key, they'll do the whole batch. And
Yep.
there's a little tooltip that'll tell them that or whatever. But
Yeah, that's good stuff for sure. What about just in general, global variables, like having a whole bunch, so when you go to data viewer, you have a bunch of them there? Yes, no, best practice, not best practice?
Well, why would you have a bunch?
For example, like security. So like if you have, when a user logs on, to have all their different things that you want to read in scripts to see if they have access to a function or not.
Off on the command on.
Yeah, or like if a script is, I don't know, there's a lot of good reasons to have them for various different things that you're doing on the layouts, because you can go into a script and like define them and then have them, but then they tend to not get cleared. So I guess I'm asking if some people think that's okay and worth it.
They get, they get cleared when you close file.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a table full of globals. And the table is called globals.
Yeah. But there's a difference between a global. So like a table full of globals, you might have one record in that table, and you might have presets that are your application level presets that get stored in there. That way, every user gets the same set of presets when they open. So this is kind of what the session model is based on. So you have, if you look up session models for regular programming, not regular programming, but programming in general, you have the application session, which is FileMaker. Then you have the app session, which is your .fmp12 file, and then you have the user session, which is what is unique to that user when they log in. So if you think about those things, the global table concept is your app globals. Those are things that are unique to the file, but the same for all users. If you have things that are on your FileMaker server, like get host name or whatever like that, those are things that are unique to your server. And then you'll have user profile things, which are like your privileges example, or like a navigation stack is another common thing you have a global variable for tracking navigation through your system. But again, whether or not it's okay to store those is like, it depends on what you're using it for. So like if you're using it for like a forward and back button, you're always modifying it to remove or add items to that, or clearing it. If you're using it,
another example, right? Breadcrumbs, yeah.
Yeah, if you're using it for a state, there's no problem using that, because every time you reset that state, it should be overwriting those values anyways. So there's not really any danger at leaving them there.
Right.
Your users aren't going to use the data viewer, and it's
No,
very
that's
useful.
not, well, I mean, for developers, so I think the reason that I brought this one up is like, as a developer, if you use them heavily, when you go to the data viewer, it's going to kind of be polluted with them. And so you're going to have to kind of, you have to sort of look
So
past
for
it. A couple
for
of developers I know find that really
organizational,
annoying.
yeah, so I think a good best practice for organization is treating this how like most other programming languages treat this. So like if you're doing a user session, like a cookie for a web browser
Mhm.
session, that's stored as key value pairs inside of one storage space. So in FileMaker, what you should be doing for your global variables is putting all alike things into one JSON object and one global variable. So you might have like
Yeah.
$$ user, and then that user object then is a JSON object of everything to do
Yeah.
with that. So you might have user.permissions, you might have user.name, user.login time, whatever you need
Yeah.
in there, but it's all contained in that one object. So when you open up the data viewer, you see one item for user, and when you look at that value, it's the JSON, which is relatively easy to read if you wrap it in JSON format elements or whatever, and then you can see all of the values currently set for that
I
user
like it.
session.
I think I would submit that that's the best practice. I actually do it in a global field, and then I have a layout off screen that has that field. And I like doing it that way because if I want to modify the contents of the field to test something, I can. Like, turn a flag on. And of course, you could do that in data viewer for a global variable. It's just more convenient if it's a global field. So others do that. I think storing a ton of information in JSON in a single place is so much better than having a bunch of individual global variables and global fields for that same thing. Any discussion on that? Anybody disagree?
No, and in this day and age, it's like JSON, understanding how to set and retrieve JSON, I think is just a requirement of every FileMaker developer.
Yeah.
At this point, it's the best way to pass script parameters when you have more than one value to a script. It's the best way to kind of, I mean, it's the best thing for key value pairs in FileMaker. So why wouldn't you use it? And once you learn that, it becomes much easier to try to, train a developer for the next level of intermediate to advanced level knowledge of like API integration, because they're already familiar with, like, JSON is the language that, 80-ish% of modern REST APIs are based on. XML is still out there, but it's falling in favor, and FileMaker really doesn't have built-in XML functions that are great for creating and updating and retrieving XML data. But there's custom functions for that if you want. But at that point of time, you already understand the JSON structure, so implementing XML functions becomes easier.
We got a graphic. Look in chat. I love it.
So I guess now I use a key pairs table to set globals with, using a loop to go through it, and active or inactive items. I'm now going to have to take, I guess, and turn it into outputting JSON instead of outputting individual globals.
Yeah, you've got calculated globals too. That's interesting. Interesting.
So yeah, a couple of years ago we had Nat Robinson from Beeswax. He presented an alternative to JSON, actually, for storing massive amounts of of data. He built a lot of variable arrays. It was mind-boggling, but it was interesting. I guess part of it was because of performance issues, and it seemed to like get around a lot of that stuff because you could navigate to data without having to parse and read the entire, an entire block of text, essentially, to find what it is it's looking for.
And Claris, the engineers themselves, have optimized the JSON functions because that's what's built in to FileMaker. So if you use a custom function that's 10 years old or something that existed before the while loop exists, say, for example, like that function might still be using old style recursion, so it's not very performant. So you could take that and maybe rewrite it to make it a little more performant, or you could just use JSON.
So to make it more efficient, does anybody know under the hood with JSON what makes that more efficient? Is it not having to parse the entire block of text to define variables, or is it like
Since
creating
it's referenced by its
indexes within?
path, so the engine that they use, I actually did talk to Clay about this, but whatever package that they use to unwrap JSON into, I don't know, like Objective-C or whatever the core language of the calculation engine is, already is capable of referencing things using its path through dot notation. So you can throw an extremely complicated, long, deeply nested path at it, and it just essentially, those paths are like locally indexed in memory. So it already knows that path exists, so it doesn't have to go through the whole object to get to that path. It just, it asks for that path. Either it gets it or it doesn't.
So it doesn't kind of indexing then, or what?
Yes and no. I don't know how to best explain it from Clay's perspective, but essentially it doesn't need to read all of the keys to know that that key exists. It asks for that key and it either exists or it doesn't. So it's basically a Boolean function of it's going to return that value or it's going to return an error. So it's much faster that way because whatever that package is that's unwrapping that JSON is directly asking for it. It's like if you type on your keyboard, if you want to type a Z on your keyboard, you don't type A, B, C, D, E, F, G all the way to get to Z. You just type Z. So it's the same kind of concept.
Okay. Yeah, because I think the point of that other presentation we received is with the variable arrays, you could jump, using, even if it's like a 2 or 3 dimensional array, you could jump directly to something by number and not have to, well, that's what's happening in the hood. It has some other means of indexing, but you jump straight to something without actually having to parse a massive amount of text to find it.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and most of that's just about understanding what JSON notation is like. So if I'm using JSON get element, I'll type something out as an example here. And let's say that I have some JSON stored. And let's just say that I want the 5th user in my list. So I'll do users 5 dot name dot or contact dot email. They'll do something like this, where that's really all you need to understand to get data out of deeply nested JSON is the difference between what's in the brackets for an array and what's in an object, which is the dot notation. So if I'm reading what I just posted in the chat, I have an array of users. So has at least 6 records in it because arrays start at 0 in JSON. So I'm asking for the 6th record in my users array. And then that gives me back an object. And then I'm asking for the contact object inside of that user object. And I'm asking for the email address inside of that contact object. So when you look at that in actual JSON, you're nested, 4, 5 levels deep to get that information out.
Yeah, I use a tool called JSON Pathfinder, a website that you dump the JSON in, and you click on whatever element you want. It gives you the path at the top, which makes it really easy to take and write your get element stuff.
Yeah, I use a JSON editor online is the same way.
All right, don't kill me. ChatGPT to write FileMaker code for something that you just need to do something kind of quickly, and you're like, you can paste in some data, and I say I need a function FileMaker that converts this into that.
If you can answer this question, I'll say like that's a good thing. What is FileMaker code?
Like calculations to begin with.
Well,
those are calculations.
Engine. Pardon?
Those are calculations. They're not. That's not code, is it?
Well, you can actually have it write scripts too, but that's really tricky to copy and paste that stuff.
Right.
But the calculation can have a while loop in it. That's code, right?
Yeah. But like for a calculation, I found it really useful. I think Jeff also liked it, but for certain things. Like I could write this function, it would take me 15 minutes. It takes ChatGPT 30 seconds. I'll just do that. And if it's
but
wrong,
I ran it.
Yeah, but it took me
wasted
it took me 20 minutes to figure out that it was lying to me when
yeah, that's definitely the thing. You have to be smart enough to know that it's wrong and like, yeah.
I was
I
thinking, I did that once, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know there was this function existed. I totally escaped because I was looking at what was it, regular expressions. I was trying to get some regular expression, and I was trying to get it to code a regular expression for me. He said, oh, just do this, and it's like, where did that regular expression come from? I wasn't familiar that existed in FileMaker, and I was looking all over for it, and, and it didn't exist. It just made it up. I said, I went back and coded on it, and it said, I said, oh, well, you have to make it. And
But it invents all kinds of FileMaker calculations and script steps that don't exist, and I tell it, it's like that doesn't exist.
So that's part of the problem is it doesn't know the FileMaker coding language, because FileMaker's coding language isn't a coding language. Like when you compare it to something like JavaScript or CSS or HTML, like those have, you basically can feed the documentation into it and it understands. But in order to have it understand FileMaker, you need to have it understand the difference between the calculation engine and the database being involved in that calculation engine to give it context. Like it has no concept of context, because in all other programming languages, context is generally assigned at runtime, where in FileMaker you assign context at development time. So like as an example, like if you have a dynamic web page, you code the web page without any sort of data, and then you hand the data to that web page, and then the web server goes, great, here's your web page. In FileMaker, you have to put the table name and the field name on your layout and everything like that. So I mean, it's going to take some work. Will it eventually get there? Yes, but it's still also never going to replace, like, you have to understand FileMaker. You have to learn FileMaker if you want to be able to error check for that. So
what's
actually,
going to happen?
some people are already feeding XML code to the like ChatGPT and other things, and they're experimenting with it being able to insert and remove and change the XML that's behind FileMaker.
Hopefully they remembered to remove their credentials out of there. And
So what's going to happen in 3 weeks when the new FileMaker comes out with AI-enabled capabilities?
So again, I mean, they showed it off at Engage U, so it's a little bit less of a secret now. But if you think about how FileMaker implemented CoreML, the machine learning functions, it's kind of the same thing. There's going to be a couple script steps, there's going to be a couple functions, but you're still going to have to set up your own AI. It's not like I can put in my ChatGPT like credentials and it's going to like all magically work for that. So like you have to host your own server, and there'll be a white paper probably for that. But an LLM, large language model, is something that you have to train, similar to like if you have a computing model for machine learning, which you can already do in FileMaker. That it's the same thing. You train your model, you compile it, it becomes the thing, and then you can start dealing with that with functions and script steps. It'll be the same thing for this too. But you're training an LLM, or you're starting from a point from one of the open source LLMs out there, but you still have to host that. So that there's a couple implications of that. There's hardware implications. Generally, AI hardware is still in its infancy. Like you can't go on AWS right now and get an AI optimized, like a server that's optimized to run AI. That stuff is still months to years off before that's, cheap and readily available. And then the second thing is the complexity and the ownership and the management of that model, having to train that model. Again, if you open it up, you have to feed it all of the data out of your system. You have to feed it to train it. And then depending on how you feed it and like how you structure and instruct it, that that's going to directly correlate to its usefulness. But in the marketing email they sent out, they had a dashboard with a graph on it, and they popped open a little dialogue, and somebody typed out, show me a bar chart of sales grouped by month or something, and it drew them a chart. That's great. So eventually I think it will be capable of that, but to get it to that point, like if I'm a FileMaker developer and somebody just wants that as a permanent change on their dashboard, it's much faster for me to build them that chart than it would be for me to set up the whole infrastructure behind AI, and say, okay, I can build you that chart, but it's going to cost you an extra $200 a month in hosting for this language model and another 30 hours for us to integrate AI for you. And then you can type in and get that chart. So a good thing to probably watch out for is Microsoft and Lens, for their integration of AI across the product line. If anybody uses Power BI, it's already there. So you can already do that type of stuff where you just ask it to draw you a chart and it generally pops one out. Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of discussion. That's definitely the thing. And also there's a big unknown about like how far is Claris going to be able to take AI, because they're an Apple subsidiary, and Apple's take on AI yet is still a little fuzzy. So if Apple says you're only allowed to use these language models or something, that's something that could actually become locked down maybe in the future, depending on. Yeah. That's a whole nother hour discussion.
Exactly. And we're coming up to the end of this one.
Minutes. So as a developer utility, though, AI is great for, especially if you're branching out, like if you want to learn how to, like you can feed a JSON object into ChatGPT and say, how do I get this? Like, what is the path for this in dot notation? And it will give you the path similar to what I typed out there. And then you can copy and paste that and use it in JSON and get element, which might be useful for dealing with APIs and that kind of stuff. It has some knowledge about APIs, so you could say, like, can you give me a sample curl request for getting a campaign from Constant Contact, and it will generate one for you that's useful. You can ask it for like a basic HTML layout, like if you're doing a web viewer. So it's good at maybe creating as a developer tool for replacing what you would normally hunt around on Google and Stack Overflow for 15 minutes to try to find a template or somebody's demo code that you can copy and then use that as your starting point to then modify. But as a direct replacement of having usable code to copy and paste into FileMaker, it's a long way off. It's not impossible, but it's not there yet where I would say jump in and start using it.
All right, great discussion. Got to wrap up the meeting. So thank you everybody for your participation, and maybe next time we'll have more people on camera. It definitely adds a nicer element to it. So we'll get the invite out for next month's discussion a little bit earlier, and hopefully won't have that issue with the 25 people limit. So Matt, Mike, greatly appreciated. Everybody has said good conversation.
Yep.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks everyone. This was fun.
Yep.
Keep growing this and getting it bigger.
Yeah,
right.
That'd be great.
See you guys next month.
Okay, thanks. See everybody.
When do you do the next shootout?
Oh yeah, we should plan one of those. It's another year. We should do it.
Those are great fun.
Yeah, I like them too. And we have lots more topics to discuss on them too, I think. All right.
Okay, thanks everybody.